Hello and welcome back. Today is Thursday, January 9th, 2025, and we are reading Chapter 8 of Abhorsen by Garth Nix today. And I'm going to get right into this chapter after I tell you that I've got my long video posted. It is going to premiere this Saturday on 1/11, January 11th at 1:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I've scheduled it. It's done. It's up. Now I can do other stuff, so that's what I'm going to do. I hope you'll watch it. I can't wait to read this chapter. This book is getting really good, and let's get into it. Let me move this light a little bit. There we go. Chapter 8, The Testing of Sameth. Sam walked around his small perimeter again, checking to make sure nothing was approaching. Not that he could see much through the rain and the foliage. Or hear anything, for that matter, till it would be too close for him to do anything but fight. He checked Lirael again for any sign of change, but she remained in death, her body still as a statue, rimmed with ice, cold billowing out to freeze the puddles at her feet. Sam thought about breaking off a piece of ice to cool himself down, but decided against it. There were several large dog footprints in the middle of the frozen puddle, for the disreputable dog, unlike her mistress, was able to bodily cross into death, confirming Sam's guess that her physical form was entirely magical. The guard's body was still propped up against the tree as well. Sam had considered laying her out properly, but that seemed stupid when it meant putting her body down into the mud. He wanted to give her body a proper ending too, but didn't dare use the charter magic required. Not until Lirael came back, at least. Sam sighed at that thought, and wished he could shelter out of the rain against the tree until Lirael did return. But he was acutely aware that he was responsible for Lirael's safety. He was alone again, in effect, now without even the dubious companionship of Mogget. It made him nervous, but the fear that had been with him all through his flight from Belisar was gone. This time, he simply didn't want to let his Aunt Lirael down. So he hefted his sword and began once again to walk around the tight ring of trees he'd selected as his patrol route. He was halfway around when he heard something above the steady sound of the rain. A soggy snap of wet twigs breaking underfoot, or something like it. A sound out of keeping for the forest. Immediately, Sam knelt down behind the checkered trunk of a large fern and froze so he could hear better. At first, all he heard was the rain and his own beating heart. Then he caught the sound again. A soft footfall, leaves crushed underfoot. Someone, or something, was trying to sneak up on him. The sounds were about 20 feet away, lower down the slope, hidden by all the green undergrowth. Coming closer, very slowly, just a single pace every minute or so. Sam glanced back at Lirael. There was no sign of her returning from death. For a moment, he thought he should run and tap her on the shoulder to alert her to come back. It was very tempting, because then she could take charge. He dismissed the thought. Lirael had a task to do, and so did he. There would be time enough to call her back if he had to. Perhaps it was only a big lizard crawling up between the ferns, or a wild dog, or one of those large black flightless birds that he knew lived in these mountains. He couldn't remember what they were called. It wasn't anything dead. He would have sensed it for sure, he thought. A magic creature would be sizzling from the rain, and he'd smell it. Probably. It moved again, but not uphill. It was circling around, Sam realized, perhaps trying to work its way past them to attack down the slope. That would be a human trick. It could be a necromancer, said a fearful part of Sam's mind. Not dead, so you couldn't sense it. Wielding free magic, but not of it, so you couldn't smell anything. It could even be him. It could be Hedge. Sam's sword hand began to tremble. He gripped the hilt tighter, made the trembling stop. The burn scars on his wrists grew livid, bright with the effort. This is it, he told himself. This was the test. If he didn't face whatever was out there now, he would know he was a coward forever. Lirael didn't think he was, nor the dog. He had to run from Astariel, but not out of fear. He had been made to by magic, and Lirael had run too. There was no shame in that. It moved again, slinking closer. Sam still couldn't see it, but he was sure he knew where it was. He reached into the charter and felt his heart slow from a frantic pace as he was embraced by the familiar calm of the magic that linked all living things. Drawing in the air with his free hand, Sam called forth 4 bright charter marks. The 5th he spoke under his breath into his cupped hand. When the marks joined, Sam held a dagger that was like a sunbeam caught in his hand, too bright to look at directly, but golden at a glance. "For the charter!" Sun dagger in one hand, sword in the other, Sam roared a battle cry and leapt forward, crashing through the ferns, slipping in the mud, half falling down the slope. He saw a flash of movement behind a tree and changed direction, still roaring, his father's berserker blood beating in his temples. There was the enemy, a strange, pallid little man, who disappeared. Sam tried to stop. He dug his heels in, but his feet skidded in the mud, and he ran straight into a tree trunk, rebounded into a fern, and fell flat on his back. Down in the mud, he remembered his arms master telling him, "Most who go down in a battle never get up again, so don't bloody well fall down." Sam dropped the sun dagger, which was extinguished immediately, the individual marks melting into the ground, and pushed himself up. He'd been down for only a second or two, he thought, as he stared wildly around, but there was no sign of the whatever it was. Lirael. The thought struck him like a blow, and instantly he was running up the slope he'd just careered down, grabbing at ferns and branches and anything that could make him go faster. He had to get back. What if Lirael was attacked while she was still in death? Struck from behind with a dagger or a knife? She wouldn't have a chance. He made it back to the small clearing. Lirael still stood there. Icicles made from raindrops hung from her outstretched arms. The frozen pool around her feet had spread, so strange in this warm forest. She was unharmed. "Lucky I was here," said a voice behind Sam. A familiar voice. Mogget's voice. Sam whirled around. "Mogget, is that you? Where are you?" "Here, and regretting it as per usual," replied Mogget, and a small white cat sauntered out from behind a fern tree. Sam did not relax his guard. He could see that Mogget still wore his collar, and there was a bell on it. But it could be a trick. And where, or who, was that strange pale man? "I saw a man," said Sam. "His hair and skin were white, white as snow. White as your fur—" "Yes," yawned Mogget. "That was me. But that shape was forbidden to me by Jeriziel, who was— let me see. She was the 48th Abhorsen. I cannot use it in the presence of an Abhorsen, even an apprentice, without prior permission. Your mother does not generally give me permission, though her father was more flexible. Lirael cannot currently say yea or nay. So once again, you see me as I am." "The dog said that Sabriel wasn't going to let you go," said Sam. He'd not lowered his sword. Mogget yawned again, and the bell rang on his neck. It was Rana. Sam recognized both the voice and his own reaction. He couldn't help yawning himself. "Is that what that hound said?" remarked the cat, as he padded over to Sam's pack and delicately sliced open half the stitches on the patch with one sharp claw so he could climb in. "Sabriel? Is that who it was? It's been so long. I can't really remember who was who. In any case, she said what she wanted to say, and then I left. Wake me up when we're somewhere dry and comfortable, Prince Sameth, with civilized food." Sam slowly lowered his sword and sighed in exasperation. It clearly was Mogget. Sam just wasn't sure if he was pleased or not that the cat had returned. He kept remembering that gloating chuckle in the tunnel below the house, and the stench and dazzle of free magic. Ice cracked. Sam whirled about again, his heart hammering. With the cracking of the ice, he heard the echo of a distant bell. So distant, it might have been a memory or an imagined sound. More ice cracked, and Lirael fell to one knee, ice flaking off her like a miniature snowstorm. Then there was a bright flash, and the dog appeared, jumping around anxiously and growling deep in her chest. "What happened?" asked Sam. "Are you hurt?" "Not really," said Lirael, with a grimace that showed there was something wrong, and she held up her left wrist. "Some horrible little fifth-gate rester tried to bite my arm, but it didn't get through the coat. It's only bruised." "What did you do to it?" asked Sam. The dog was still running around as if the dead creature might suddenly appear. "The dog bit it in half," said Lirael, forcing herself to take several long, slow breaths. "Though that didn't stop it, but I made it obey me in the end. It's on its way to the 9th gate, and it won't be coming back." "You really are the Abhorsen in waiting now," said Sam, admiration showing in his voice. "I guess I am," replied Lirael slowly. She felt as if she'd claimed something when she announced herself as such in death, and lost something too. It was one thing to take up the bells at the house. It was another to actually use the bells in death. Her old life seemed so far away now, gone forever, and she still did not yet know what her new life would be, or even what she was. She felt uncomfortable in her own skin, and it had nothing to do with the melting ice or the rain and mud. "I can smell something," announced the dog. Lirael looked up, and for the first time noticed that Sam was much muddier than he had been, and was bleeding from a scratch across the back of his hand, though he didn't appear to have noticed it. "What happened to you?" she asked sharply. "Mogget came back," replied Sam. "At least I think it's Mogget. He's in my pack. Only at first he was a sort of really short albino man, and I thought he was an enemy." He stopped talking as the dog prowled over to his pack and sniffed it. A white paw flashed out, and the dog jerked back just in time to avoid a clawed nose. She settled back on her haunches, and her forehead furrowed in puzzlement. "It is the Mogget," she confirmed. "But I don't understand." "She gave me what she chooses to call another chance," said a voice from inside the pack. "More than you've ever done." "Another chance at what?" growled the dog. "This is no time for your games. Do you know what is being dug up 4 leagues from here?" Mogget thrust his head out of the pack. Rana jangled, sending a wave of weariness across all who heard the bell. "I know!" spat the little cat. "I didn't care then, and I don't care now. It is the destroyer, the unmaker, the unraveler." Mogget paused for a breath, just as he was about to speak again. The dog suddenly barked, a short, sharp bark, infused with power. Mogget yowled as if his tail had been trodden on, and sank hissing back into the pack. "Do not speak its name," ordered the dog. "Not in anger, not when we are so close." Mogget was silent. Lirael, Sam, and the dog looked at the pack. "We have to get away from here," Lirael sighed, wiping the most recent raindrops off her forehead before they could get into her eyes. "But first, I want to get something straight." She approached Sam's pack and leaned over it, careful to stay out of striking distance of a paw. "Mogget, you're still bound to be a servant of the Abhorsens, aren't you?" "Yes," came the grudging reply. "Worse luck." "So you will help me? Help us? Won't you?" There was no answer. "I'll find you some fish," interjected Sam. "I mean, when we're somewhere where there are fish." "And a couple of mice," added Lirael. "If you like mice, that is." Mice chewed books. All librarians disliked mice, and Lirael was no exception. She was quite pleased to discover that becoming an Abhorsen had not removed that essential part of the librarian in her. Still, she hated silverfish as well. "There is no point bargaining with the creature," said the dog. "He will do as he is told." "Fish when available, and mice, and a songbird," said Mogget, emerging from the pack, his little pink tongue tasting the air, as if the fish were even now in front of him. "No songbird," said Lirael firmly. "Very well," agreed Mogget. He cast a disdainful glance at the dog. "A civilized agreement, and in keeping with my current form. Food and lodging in return for what help I care to offer." Better than being a slave. You are a... the dog began hotly, but Lirael grabbed her collar, and she subsided, growling. There's no time for bickering, said Lirael. Hedge let Marin, the guard, go, intending to enslave her spirit later. A slow death makes for a more powerful spirit. He knows roughly where she died, and he may have had other servants in death who will report my presence, so we need to get going. We should, Sam began, as Lirael started to walk off. We have to give her a proper ending. Lirael shook her head, a diagonal motion that was neither agreement nor refusal, but simply weariness. I must be tired, she said, wiping her brow again. I promised her I would. Like the bodies of the merchant party, Marin's body, if left there, could become inhabited by another dead spirit, or Hedge might be able to use it for even worse things. Can you do it, Sam? Lirael asked, rubbing her wrist. I'm a bit worn out, to be honest. Hedge may smell the magic, warned the dog, as may any dead creatures that are close enough, though the rain will help. I've already cast a spell, said Sam apologetically. I thought we were being attacked. Don't worry, interrupted Lirael, but hurry. Sam went over to the body and drew the charter marks in the air. A few seconds later, a white-hot shroud of fire enveloped the body, and soon there was nothing left for any necromancer save the blackened rings of mail. Sam turned to go then, but Lirael stepped forward, and 3 simple charter marks fell from her open hand into the bark of the tree above the ashes. She spoke to the marks, placing her words there for any charter mage to hear in the years ahead, for as long as the tree might stand. Marin died here, far from home and friends. She was a royal guard, a brave woman who fought against a foe too strong for her. But even in death, she did her duty and more. She will be remembered. Farewell, Marin. A fitting gesture, said the dog, and a fairly stupid one, interrupted Mogget from behind Sam's head. We'll have the dead down on us in minutes if you keep doing all this magic. Thank you, Mogget, said Lirael. I'm glad you're helping us already. We're leaving now, so you can go back to sleep. Dog, please scout ahead. Sam, follow me. Without waiting for an answer, she struck off up towards the ridgeline, heading for a point where the trees clustered more thickly together. The dog ran up behind her, then slipped around to get ahead, her tail wagging. Bossy, isn't she? Remarked Mogget to Sam, who was following more slowly. Reminds me of your mother. Shut up, said Sam, pushing aside a branch that threatened to slap him in the face. You do know that we should be running as fast as we can in the other direction, said Mogget. Don't you? You told me before back at the house that there's no point running away or trying to hide, snapped Sam. Didn't you? Mogget didn't answer, but Sam knew he hadn't fallen asleep. He could feel the cat moving around in his pack. Sam didn't repeat his question because the slope was becoming steeper and he needed all his breath. Any thoughts of conversation quickly slipped away as they climbed farther, weaving between the trees and over fallen logs, torn out of the hillside by the wind and their inability to set deep roots. At last they reached the ridge, sodden despite their oilskins, and wretchedly tired from the climb. The sun, lost somewhere in cloud, was not far off setting, and it was clear they couldn't go much farther before nightfall. Lirael thought of calling a rest, but when she gestured at the dog, the hound ignored her, pretending she couldn't see the frantic hand signals. Lirael sighed and followed, thankful that the dog had turned to the west and was following the ridge now instead of climbing down. They kept on for another 30 minutes or so, though it felt like hours, till at last they came to a point where a landslide had carved out a great swathe of open ground down the northern face of the ridge. The dog stopped there, choosing a stand of ferns that would shelter them. Lirael sat down next to her, and Sam staggered in a minute later and collapsed like a broken concertina. As he sat, Mogget climbed out of his pack and stood on his hind legs, using Sam's head as a rest for his two front paws. The four of them looked down through the clearing, out and along the valley, all the way to the red lake, a dull expanse of water in the distance, lit by flashes of lightning, and what little of the setting sun made it through the cloud. Nix's pit was clearly visible, too, an ugly wound of red dirt and yellow clay in the green of the valley. The land around it was constantly struck by lightning, the boom of the thunder rolling back to the four watchers, a constant background noise. Hundreds of figures, made tiny by the distance, toiled around the pit. Even from a few miles away, Lirael and Sam could feel that they were the dead. "What are the hands doing?" whispered Lirael. Though they were hidden high on the ridge, amongst the trees and ferns, she still felt that they were on the verge of detection by Hedge and his servants. "I can't tell," replied Sam. "Moving something. That glittering thing, I think, towards the lake." "Yes," said the dog, who was standing absolutely stiff next to Lirael. "They are dragging two silver hemispheres, 300 paces apart." Behind Sam's ear, Mogget hissed, and Sam felt a shudder run down his spine. "Each hemisphere imprisons one half of an ancient spirit," said the dog. Her voice was very low. "A spirit from the beginning, from before the charter was made." "The one you said to Mogget not to name," whispered Lirael. "The Destroyer." "Yes," said the dog. "It was imprisoned long ago and trapped within the silver hemispheres. And the hemispheres were buried deep beneath wards of silver, gold, and lead, rowan, ash, and oak, and the seventh ward was bone." "So it's still bound?" whispered Sam urgently. "I mean, they might have dug up the hemispheres, but it's still bound inside them, isn't it?" "For now," said the dog. "But where the prison fails, little hope can be placed in the bonds. Someone must have found a way to join the hemispheres, though I cannot guess how, and where they are taking them." "I am sorry to have failed you, mistress," she added, sinking down on her belly, her chin digging into the ground with misery. "What?" asked Lirael, looking down at the dejected dog. For a moment she couldn't think of anything to say. Then she felt a little voice inside her ask, "What would an Abhorsen do?" And she knew that she must be what she was supposed to be. Undaunted, even though she felt exactly the opposite. "What are you talking about? It's not your fault." Her voice trembled for a second, but she disguised it with a cough before continuing. "Besides, the Destroyer is still bound. We'll just have to stop those hemispheres joining, or whatever it is Hedge plans to do with them." "We should rescue Nick," said Sam. He swallowed audibly, then added, "Though there's an awful lot of dead down there." "That's it!" exclaimed Lirael. "That's what we can do to start with, anyway. Nick will know exactly where they plan to take the hemispheres." "She plans like your mother, too," said Mogget. "What are we supposed to do? Walk down there and ask Hedge to hand over the boy?" "Mogget," Sam started to say, and the dog growled, but Lirael spoke over them. A plan of sorts had come to mind, and she wanted to get it out before it started to sound hopeless even to her. "Don't be silly, Mogget. We'll rest for a while, then I'll put on the charter skin I made on the boat and fly down as an owl. The dog can fly down too, and between both of us, we'll find Nick and sneak him away. You and Sam can follow us down, and we'll rendezvous near running water, that stream over there. By then, we'll have daylight and running water, and we can find out what's happening from Nick. What do you think?" "That is only the fourth most stupid plan I've ever heard from an Abhorsen," replied Mogget. "I like the part about sleeping for a while, though you neglected to mention dinner." "I'm not sure you should be the one to fly down," said Sam uncomfortably. "I'm sure I could get the hang of the owl shape, and I might be better able to convince Nick to come with us. And how can the dog fly?" "There won't be any convincing required," growled the dog. "Your friend Nick must be largely a creature of the Destroyer. He will have to be compelled, and we must be wary of him and any powers he may have been granted. As to flying, I just make myself smaller and grow some wings." "Oh," said Sam. "Of course. grow some wings. We'll have to watch out for Hedge, too, added Lirael, who was belatedly wondering if perhaps there wasn't a better plan after all. But it will have to be me who uses the charter skin. I made it to my size. It wouldn't fit you. I hope it isn't too crumpled in my pack. It'll take me at least 2 hours to get down to that creek, since I can't fly, said Sam, looking down the ridge. Perhaps we should all go on later tonight. Then you can fly from there. That way I'll be closer and ready immediately if there's any trouble. And you could lend me your bow so I can spell some arrows while I'm waiting. Good idea, said Lirael. We should go on, but the bow won't be much use if it keeps raining, and I don't think we can risk any more weather magic to stop it. That will give us away for sure. It'll stop before dawn, said the dog with great authority. Replied Mogget. Anyone could have told them that. It's stopping now, for that matter. Sam and Lirael looked up through the canopy of trees, and sure enough, though the storm to the northwest was constant, the clouds above and to the east were parting to show the fading red wash of the sun and the first star of the night. It was Eualis, the red star that showed the way north. Lirael was heartened to see it, though she knew it was only a shepherd's tale that said Eualis granted luck if it was the first star in the sky. Good, said Lirael. I hate flying in the rain. Wet feathers are a pain. Sam didn't answer. It was getting dark, but the lightning around the pit made it possible to make out some things down in the valley in a sort of stop-start way. There was a square-shaped blob that could easily be a tent, presumably Nick's tent, for there were no others visible. Hang on, Nick, whispered Sam. We'll save you. And that is the end of that chapter, and we are getting into what they are calling the first interlude in the next chapter. This book is broken down into part 1, part 2, part 3, and in between those parts there's first interlude and second interlude, so we'll see what that is tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, excuse me, my nose itches. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful evening. I'm going to edit this video and eat something. I'm hungry, so I guess I'll see you tomorrow night. Take care, and as always, may your magic manifest.